opportunity to share some of our work from Chile at EARMA. Today I will present our research line, which focus on educational inclusion and neurodiversity, using some examples of our work to reflect on how research can be strengthened through collaboration, community engagement, and also partnerships across institutions and sectors. Andrea, if you can share, yeah, thanks. So we can go ahead to the second slide. And before we begin, I would like to mention that our colleague Daniela Wachholtz was originally scheduled to participate in this presentation. Unfortunately, due to a medical issue, she was unable to participate and attend today. And we are grateful that Fernanda Montoya was able to join us and represent the project team today. My name is Verónica Vidal. I'm a speech-language pathologist and assistant professor at the Universidad de los Andes, Chile. And my research focuses on inclusive education, neurodiversity, communication accessibility, and participatory approaches to educational research. And joining me today is Fernanda Montoya. She's a special education teacher and also assistant professor at Universidad de los Andes, Chile. She research line focus on engagement, regulation, and also learning across different stages in the school system, but with main focus on early childhood, okay? And she has been actively involved also in the design and implementation of several of the projects that we will discuss today. Okay, so next, please, Andrea. So education is a fundamental right, and we know that, and it has declared in different, guidelines and reports from international entities. It serves also as a tool for empowerment and the realization of all other civil and social rights. In the case of students with neurodivergent profiles, many times we have issues with to meet this right of education because of the system not necessarily support well the access and also ensure how they can keep or be maintaining in the system. So what is the current reality about that is that neurodivergent students face restrictions in terms of access and insufficient reports. And there are different kind of regulations that we can observe today that are made to promote the access and support these students globally. Okay, in Chile, we also have some specific regulations. I will provide more details later that mandates access, but also fail to translate that into classroom support. And I will, most of this presentation will focus on these specific issues. Okay, so the first thing that I want to share with you is access alone does not guarantee authentic participation in classroom life. It's not the same access and participation. And we need to focus on the different elements of this progression in order to meet the different needs that the student has to fully participate in our educational systems. Next, please. So there are a lot of international policies that are supporting educational access through UN human rights. Then IDEA, right, in US that provides some guidelines of how we can support neurodivergent students in the classroom. Warner report, which is a very important issue and moment or milestone during the the history of education of neurodivergent students, to claim that the students are can be educated, right? And from this specific milestone, several other guidelines have been provided in order to support the idea that we can educate and we have to support these students in the system, such as the Salamanca Statement, UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, and ancient even declaration through the Goal 4 of the 2030 Agenda, okay? So all of these international policies focuses mainly on demanding access, demanding elimination of barriers, and also promoting high equality education for this population. However, which is great, okay? However, access is not the same than authentic participation. So at this point, we have the first part of the issue in some way resolved when we provide access to these students. But another issue is how we can support the students in the system, how can accompany these students in order that they actually participate in a good way in our educational systems. And one of the main issues of this authentic participation part is that we have limited support in real-time daily interactions, okay? So we will focus this presentation specifically on how we can develop some structures to support this idea and how we can start to go deep in these specific issues, okay? Next, please. Okay, so we need to reconceptualize educational spaces in order to be inclusive, okay? It's not enough that we provide individual supports to have good spaces that actually embrace inclusion, okay? So the first thing is access, right? And access models focusing on getting individuals through the door. So we have the students in the schools, and it is great, but that also has other kind of issues and tensions because we have professionals that are not prepared in terms of training to receive these students, peers that are not used to have these kind of students in the classroom. And at the end, in some way, we leave them isolated inside of the school, okay? So one thing is enter to the school, and then we have to start to think how we can include it, actually them in a way that they are actually participating and engaging in the activities that we are offering in these schools. So participation is the second element, right? Meaningful engagement, not only in academic activities, but also in social activities. And those elements are also part of the fundamental rights that these students have when we talk about educational rights, okay? And the third aspect is systemic lens. So we have the students, we have efforts for participation, but also we need a system that is ecologically organized to support, eliminate barriers, and provide spaces that are accommodated to these students, okay? So I know that is not an easy task. So that is why we need to start to, in some way, kind of dividing these specific elements to understand what are the different parts of this whole approach in order to take advantage and move forward in each of these aspects, okay? Next, please. So one of the main issues or the main frameworks that we have used to address these specific aspects of the practice into the schools mostly is the Universal Design for Learning, okay? This is an anticipatory approach or a preventive approach, which is different to, which is not the only one, okay? Universal Design for Learning is not the only framework that exists to support students, neurodivergent students, but this is the only one that is a preventive approach. We have another one that is differential instruction, which is a reactive approach. When the students in some way fail in the system, we provide support to accompany this student in order to progress in a better way. The good thing of the universal design is that we are taking steps before that the student fails. So we are not expecting that the student fails to make actions. We are anticipate what are the accommodations that these students need in order that this student is not failing in the system, okay? So it's a proactively designed to flexibilize environments. And with this focus, there are 3 specific principles that Universal Design for Learning offer. Multiple representations, that means how we are presenting information in the classroom. It could be diversified in terms of the students that I have, okay? If I have students that need more visual support or they need concrete more concrete information or simplified directions. All of these elements are related with the idea of multiple representation, okay? Then we have the multiple action, which is how students show knowledge, okay? So that this is at the other side of the coin, right? So we have how we are presenting information and how the student is responding to the information or showing me that he's or she is learning, right? And in this way, the students need to can show me orally, right? But a lot of neurodivergent students have issues with oral communication, so we can provide some other aspects or other modes of communication in order to show their knowledge, such as writing, such as AC devices or tablets, talkers. If we want to think broader, music, draw, right? There are different kind of elements that we can use to ensure that these students are learning. And then we have multiple engagement ways, and that is related of how we are motivating our students to participate and be engaged with the activities that we are offering in the school, okay? And also we have different kind of elements that we can provide there depending on the interest of the students, because the base of that is that we are providing learning, meaningful learning or learning based on meaningful activities, right? So we have to consider interest of the student. We have to consider kind of dynamics into the classroom. We have to consider different ways of learning, okay? In Chile, particularly in Chile, we have a decree to promote inclusion into the classroom, and basically what the national curriculum is supporting is integrating universal design for learning into the national pedagogical resources that our teachers are implementing in the classroom, okay? Next, please. However, and I don't think that this is very different to the reality of other parts of the world, but most of them, I will at least. We know that even when the regulation is giving us guidelines in terms of how we should implement practices that are more aligned with the inclusive education, the reality is that is much more complex. So at the stage 1, I would say at the level of the curriculum design, we have a high adoption, okay? So anyone know that the curriculum include integration of universal design learning into the the general guidelines for all schools. If you ask even to the teachers, they will say that they do that. Okay. Stage 2, instructional planning. And I would say that at this point, we have a middle adoption of that. So we have more schools that are able to implement universal learning, design for learning at the level of planning. And a lot of teachers even are complain a little bit because they think that they have to, plan twice, because they have to plan their regular class and also universal design plan, which is something that also we have discussed a lot with the teachers, because the idea is not that you have two plannings, right? The idea is that you have a diversified planning from the beginning, and that is much more efficient than you are planning twice, right? And then you have stage 3, which focus on classroom interactions. And this is the part where we have less implementation. There is a limited adoption of that. Teachers complain a lot that they don't know how to implement in the classroom what they are planning, how they can in real time accommodate the planning in order to meet the diversity of the students they have in the classroom. So what we can say at this point is that in terms of this course and in terms of planning, UDL has a very good adoption. But at the end of the real time, daily classroom interactions, we have a limited adoption. Okay. Next, please. So one of the issues, I'm kind of integrating models here, but one of the issues that we have is we have in Chile several programs that are government funded for not only for neurodiversity, neurodivergent students, but also for vulnerable populations from different tools, funding tools. So we have a lot of programs in the schools, but those are kind of fragmented. So one of the things that we can do in order to organize these resources and start to develop something that actually will help organize and give a structure to the support that the schools receive, the students receive in the schools, is this multi-tier system of support. And MTSS is an evidence-based practice which is designed to enhance students' academic, but also behavioral and social emotional outcomes. It's something that came from the Tier 1, which is the preventive level, universal instruction that intend to meet the needs of most of the students. But we know that in the classroom specifically, we're not able to meet all the needs of the students because some students need more support. And we have a Tier 2, where you have a target support complementing Tier 1 for students that need more support than the regular classroom. But some of these students even are not able to progress just in Tier 2, so we need a Tier 3, which is an intensive, specialized support for those students that need more support, okay? And the idea of this multi-tiered system of support is that also the resources of the system are better addressed, because you provide the individualized support to a small group of students. So we need to focus on specific interventions for them, but you have at the base teachers, well-prepared teachers that are helping to promote most of the students with some of the skills and resources that we can provide for them, okay? And this system align very well, thinking of you are also have a lot of information about mental health with the World Health Organization recommendations for public health interventions, which is a very similar or even kind of the same structure when you have these preventive, indicative, and selective interventions. Next, please. Okay, so we have this implementation gap. We have a systemic fragmentation where we have a lot of programs in Chile that are supporting different population with some vulnerability, and they align, many of them align with the MTSS principles. Implementation is fragmented and is inconsistent. And we need to prioritize in some way in vulnerable schools more the idea of well-being and development instead of attendance, which is the focus that most of the vulnerable schools has today in Chile. Okay. So based on that, next, please. We want to show you some a set of studies that we are implementing here. But first, I want to, ask why studying MTSS in Chile could be useful for you if you are in Europe, right? Or mostly, at least. So first of all, Chile is a medium-high income country with new and advanced inclusion regulation. We have already new laws focus on specifically increase the access of students in the system, regular system, for neurodivergent population. And also we have a new law for autistic students specifically that provide and ensure access, permanence, and high quality in the schools. And this is a very new regulation where had bring also a lot of issues in the schools because the schools now have the obligation to attend this population, but not necessarily they have the training to support well these students. Okay. Second, high educational inequalities is we can see here in the country, resources constraints for sure, and a fragmented MTSS implementation. So that is also an experience to show you how with even a lot of difficulties, you are able to provide systems that not necessarily involve a high amount of resources, but optimize the resources that are available for the population. And also maybe use these studies to show how to build culturally responsive and sustainable systems with potential for scalability and equity insights for US and Europe. Thinking also that you have a lot of vulnerable populations that can have similar characteristics in some way that we also have here in Chile. Next, please. Okay, so what do we have here in Chile regarding MTSS? We have mostly solved the tier 3 through the school integration program. In the school integration program, we have SLPs, we have psychologists, we have special education teachers or psychopedagogical professionals that are daily or at least twice per week supporting students with specific skills. We also have social skills programs in tier 2. We have also some schools that are already implementing peers, for example, for the students with neurodivergent students. But what we don't have at all is support for tier 1. And that's what is the main focus of the first program that I wanted to show you today. So next, because of the time, I will go fast. So we did already 4 years ago 16 focus groups across different regions in Chile to understand how the communities perceive inclusion in their communities, local communities. And what we had from different regions of Chile is that exclusion is a recurring experience in schools. There are cultural factors because there are wrong conceptualizations or old conceptualizations, negative attitudes, and a lot of ableism in this population, which is focused right on the idea of you have to have a lot of skills in order to progress and be successful in the school, okay? Social factors such as isolation, peer rejection, inaccessibility of the educational environment, in not only physical but sensory and communication barriers that are also present in the schools, especially for autistic students, inadequate teacher training, and lack of support system within schools. And there is a need for transformation to advance in inclusion, raising awareness with school communities, preparing professionals to implement differentiated and inclusive teaching practices, strengthening school climate and relationships, and also promoting environmental and learning accessibility. Next. So in order to advance that, we started to think about attitudes as the main or initial point, as a catalyst for cultural change. Thinking of the theory of learned behavior, attitudes influence intentions toward inclusive education, and these intentions are the basis of behavior. So we have psychological and pedagogical improvements if we are changing attitudes. We have organizational improvements in terms of culture and professional collaboration, and also social-cultural improvements, reflecting community engagement, reduces stigma, promotes the establishment of inclusive social norms. So based on this idea, we developed a program, next, that we call Convive en el Aula program, which is something like coexisting in the classroom, which is a constructed school-based pilot aimed at strengthening inclusive school culture to better respond or accommodate neurodiversity. And the program has 3 components: an asynchronous online course of 9 modules that the teachers completed, individual teacher coaching sessions where we review the planning with them of each week, and instead of change this planning, we try to add some tips in order to diversify the ways that they are doing the practice in the classroom, okay? We know that teachers doesn't have time. So we don't want that they have to make a lot of efforts in order to accommodate that, because that at the end causes more negative effects than positive effects. So we try to accommodate what they had daily. And then we have 2 workshops where experiential face-to-face workshops. The first one was a sensory activity where they have to feel and try different sensory preferences. And then a final workshop, which is a challenge to develop some activity in a more inclusive way, like a community activity, established community activity, but in an inclusive way. So we implemented that with teachers of elementary school, and now we are proving the same program with teachers of high school. And the idea of that is focusing on organizational readiness and cultural changes by identifying attitudinal and professional shifts. Those are pictures of the program. So next, based on that, we have some early outcomes of cultural change. We know that the program was high accepted in the community, especially the coaching sessions and the workshops. The asynchronous component was a little harder because they report that they have time constriction or restrictions. In terms of quantitative changes, we implemented the Matisse scale that we have to validate first for our population. And the results show an increase in the behavioral dimension of of teachers, attitudes, and in the affective part dimension. The cognitive dimension remains stable, and we think that that is part because of some resistance in terms of conceptualization, which is a topic that could be, could have need more time to change. We also apply the scales for students because we want to know how the information that we provide to the teachers was offered to the students. If they have some influence about what we did with the teachers with the specific students. And we saw that they don't have a lot of changes, but we have a tendency in the affective dimension, thinking that could be like a tendency for improving attitudes. However, this is not significant for this study, in part because the sample is pretty small, okay? And the other thing is qualitative shifts observed. We observe an expanded repertory of pedagogical resources. We saw increased confidence, which is very nice, that some practices that they already have, they feel confident to implement it in a, more established way. And also a collaborative duty in terms of how we have to address inclusive responsibility. And this was not only seen in the teachers, we also saw that with students, which is pretty nice because they have a view of the inclusion more related with the idea of coexistence, not only with the idea of assistance, which is something that is pretty common to observe in peers. Next, please. Okay. Fernanda will share some other aspects of the project.
Oh, thank you, Verónica. So I would like to begin by framing inclusion not as something that happens in one institution, but as a trajectory. Our work, as Verónica says, starts in schools where we are interested in the sensitivity of the educational community and the conditions that allow students to participate and belong. But the same question becomes even more urgent when students move into higher education. Chile has made important legal and policy advances, yet participation in higher education remains limited for people with disabilities. Official information based on the Second National Disability Study reports that only around 9.1% of adults with disabilities complete higher education. This is not only an access problem, it is also a continuity problem. What we are observing is a lack of articulation between levels. Schools often speak about inclusive practices, while universities tend to respond through individual accommodations. Between those two worlds, expectations, supports, and participation opportunities are frequently lost. This is why we need to understand inclusion across the school-university transitions, not only inside each institution separately. The next one, please. So the second message that I want to talk about is methodological. In our associated research line in higher education, we are examining the perceptions of disability among students, faculty, and institutional leaders. This study was intentionally designed through a collaboration between the School of Education and the Faculty of Economics and Business because inclusion is also an organizational issue. One of the most interesting preliminary findings is that the survey data looks very positive, but students and faculty tend to agree or strongly agree that inclusive practices exist, that disability inclusion is valid, and that institutional culture supports students with disabilities. However, when we interview participants or explore these themes more deeply, a picture emerges different. We hear about frustrated expectations, difficulties for participating in activities and social life, tensions between inclusion and academic rigor, and the perception that institutions do not always take responsibility for inclusion in a systematic way. This tells us that we don't need only more data. We need better measures, instruments that can capture and discriminate the perceptions of different agents, mixed methods designs that allow us to identify where inclusive discourse and life experience diverge. The next one, please. So the implication is that inclusion should not be conceptualized as a sum of isolated accommodations. We need a life course, inclusive system framework. In this framework, inclusive participation emerges from the interaction between three levels. Verónica talked about this one in the beginning of the presentation, but basically, the first level of individual support remains important, but they are not sufficient. The second and the third level talk about interactional and system level conditions. Across all of this, we need a culture change that for neurodiversity and inclusion. For European partners, as we are talking with you, I think this creates three opportunities. First, research design should be longitudinal, participatory, and system-oriented. Second, funding structure should support long-term and interdisciplinary work that spans educational levels. Third, research management can become strategic, not only administrating projects, but connecting fragmented initiatives, building partnerships, and helping evidence become sustainable for institutional change. Our final message is that inclusion is a life course process. Research and inclusion must be designed, founded, and managed across the life course of each children that comes to educational levels. So the next one, please. And thank you. This is very short part. Thank you to listen to us.
Thank you very much, Verónica and Fernanda. Do we have any questions straight away in the chat? See, we don't really.